We're live.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Cabinet meeting. Let's begin the agenda. So, do we have any apologies?
No apologies, Chair.
Okay, possible that Councillor Stannard might be slightly late as a result of an overrunning earlier commitment. Declarations of interest. Any declarations of interest? Okay, thank you. Any public questions and petitions?
No, none.
Right, and minutes of the last meeting. Accuracy of those minutes held on the 9th of September. Okay, I take that they are a true record.
Can I have hands?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, remember everybody's hand has to go up for the record. Okay, so let's move on then to item 5, which is on page 13. So in the absence of Councillor Stannard, I will go through this report. So this is a set of provisions which are designed to be temporary and last as long as the COVID restrictions are in place, and that's obviously for public health purposes. A full copy of the report is with the papers, but the summary of it is at the front and picks out the salient points. So, you know, for a democratic and transparent organisation, we want to make sure that the public can engage with the council in a number of areas, not least in terms of planning, and that really requires us to think about ways in which the views of residents can be included in some of our thinking and some of our work. What this report does is it provides local authorities with a number of provisions to ensure that the public health issues are a priority. So, for example, documents that we would normally have, plain documents we'd normally have for inspection, and we have to provide hard copies for. There are some requirements that we do not have to follow in that area during this pandemic period. The other issues relate, for example, and I draw your attention to paragraph 10 of the report, the equality duties under the Equality Act 2010, and we have to ensure that we are compliant as far as possible with those requirements. Clearly, the main avenue for us to engage with the public, as it is with this meeting today, is through the council's YouTube channel, and the Coronavirus Act 2020 enables us to do that. There is some discussion going further forward, because planning committees are meeting virtually, that we may be able to hold hybrid meetings. That means obviously where some people are able to attend in person and some more remotely, and that will help give maximum flexibility to enable us to meet some of our obligations under the equality legislation. So there's a series of points that cover consultations on planning applications. Clearly, hard copies are unlikely to be readily available. Face-to-face events are difficult, but the provisions do encourage the council as far as possible to enable the public to make their views known, and clearly virtually is going to be the most effective way. So, this is a document, as I said, which is for temporary purposes, and we have to suck it and see, frankly, in terms of the trends with COVID, the public health provisions, and of course those are enshrined in the 2020 COVID Act. So the recommendation is to adopt the updated temporary statement of community involvement. So I can pick up any questions from people on that. Cabinet members. Gail?
Thanks, Alan. Merely to say that I don't actually see that we have any alternative at the moment. We need to do our very best so that people can get the information they need and are aware of the information, but we are in a very difficult and challenging climate at the moment.
Yeah. Any other cabinet members? I'm going to bring in Judith and Catherine if they have anything to say. Welcome, Catherine. And Judith, of course, but I think is your first time, Catherine, at Cabinet?
Yes, it is.
It is. Well, welcome.
Thank you.
You can enjoy the words of wisdom and so on from Cabinet members and colleagues from opposition groups. So I've done that. Maybe I haven't done that entirely justice in the same way that Councillor Stannard would have done, but do either of you have any comments that you would like to make?
Just to say that we're intending to do a full update of the SCI next year. This is, as you said earlier, this is temporary, and we'll pick up all the other changes that need to be made to it next year in a full update, which will be subject to public consultation as well.
Okay, Catherine, then I'll bring in Gail.
No, I've nothing further to add. I think you've both provided a good summary.
Okay, well, thank you. Gail.
Councillor Stannard said he's waiting to be admitted.
Yeah, Chair, if we finish this item, he'll have to be here for an entire item, so we'll have to have the vote and he can come for the next item. Okay,
that's very useful. That saves me picking up the white paper in his stead. Okay, any other questions? Anything from James or Sandra?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just to, I suppose, yeah, these are all very sensible and pragmatic changes, but I want to just highlight what I think is some good practice that I've seen this week, where I've had been doing a bit of work involving a planning application in my ward, and the planning officer concerned volunteered to come into City Hall, get something printed out in large format for a member of the public who wasn't online, and bike it round to them. So although these regulations allow us to do the bare minimum, I think it's very important to note that our officers are going above and beyond to make sure that the public are still able to engage with the planning process.
Thank you, James. It's a very welcome remark, and we thank officers, as we do on many occasions during this COVID period, for going beyond the call of duty. Sandra.
Yeah, also just to say that it's obviously appropriate to update the statement, and I also think it's appropriate to keep reviewing it as we go, as the situation emerges. You may know that I sit on planning, and I'm really happy that after the sort of summer break we had to have, residents can attend planning virtually again. And I'm actually really proud that we're exceptional in that the planning committee has not limited residents' engagement, where I know other councils have done so. And as you've already said, Councillor Waters, is what I'm really passionate about would be to go forward with hybrid meetings, so we can keep that part of engagement in a very flexible way. My question was actually around something that James just mentioned. I just wanted to know whether it's still possible for residents to meet with planning officers, because often this one-to-one meeting where planning officers maybe make a site visit and explain what a development may look like is really important. So I just wanted to know whether socially distanced meetings with officers can still go ahead.
Okay.
Do you want me to come in that one?
Yes, please, Catherine.
Yes, we've got a site visit risk assessment. So obviously we have to be very cautious, but we are visiting both applicants and neighbours when needed to. We are trying our best to make those meetings as safe as possible, obviously for both parties. So ideally we do that conversation on the phone, but obviously some situations you do need to go and see the neighbour and indeed the site. And so it may be appropriate, for instance, to have the discussion outside rather than inside. But yes, we are trying to be as flexible as possible.
That's a very, very good message to put out into the public arena. So thank you. No further points on that. Okay, we have the recommendation updating temporary involvement, but as we know, this is to the public health circumstances. Okay, all those in support of the recommendation, if you could show your hands, please. Excellent. And can I thank Catherine and Judith for the report? Okay, can we let Councillor Stannard in now?
We can indeed.
Been waiting on the metaphorical doorstep for too long. So, Mike,
I have been screaming down the phone at you. I've been in the waiting room for, well, since 1:30.
Yeah, I was
listening to you give the speech I had already prepared.
Apologies, Councillor Stannard.
Yeah,
I can't let you in mid-item, so
it wasn't. I was there before. I was there at 1:30.
Right.
Apologies.
Okay, Mike, good to see you. Could you go on to we're on
where are we on the agenda?
Planning white paper consultation.
Right. So the government is currently consulting on 2 sets of proposed changes to the planning system: the planning white paper, Planning for the Future, and changes to the current planning system. Planning for the Future would, if implemented, replace the current planning system in England. In his forward to the white paper, the Prime Minister writes that he wants to tear it down and start again. Changes to the current planning system would make radical changes to the system for delivering affordable housing. Planning for the Future would create new planning zones of growth, renewal and protected areas. In growth areas, outline planning permission for some types of development would be automatic. In renewal areas deemed suitable for development, there would be a statutory presumption in favour of development. Protected areas would include conservation areas where development will be restricted. These changes directly undercut the role of local democratically accountable planning committees. There is little information in the white paper about how the new system of zones would work. In addition, it is not clear how this one-size-fits-all system would affect Norwich, a growing city which also has many conservation areas, but it could stifle necessary development in Norwich if there is a lack of flexibility and the City Council is no longer able to make local adjustments to reflect local circumstances. Alongside this, Planning for the Future would also introduce a further loss of local democratic control of the planning system. Local plans will be rules-based, not based on local policies, and general development policies would be set nationally. Public consultation would be mainly at plan-making stage, where more conceptual plans would be agreed in principle, and it is not clear how local people would be able to influence specific proposals at the later decision-making stage of the process. This would seem likely to stifle public engagement rather than facilitate it. The loss of a duty to cooperate and the possibility of individual local authorities making their own plans in isolation would make no sense in an area like Greater Norwich and could be seriously detrimental to the city. The white paper is very vague on how such cooperation would be ensured in the future. The sustainability appraisal system would be abolished and replaced by a new, allegedly simpler statutory sustainable development test, but there are no details of what this would be or how it would work. So we're being asked again to sign up to a proposal with a lack of critical detail. There would also be an extension of permitted development for some replicable schemes. The changes to the current planning system consultation propose changes to the methodology for assessing housing need, with an aim to build 300,000 new homes per annum. It blames the current planning system for a failure to deliver housing, despite no evidence of this and the fact that 90% of planning applications nationally have been approved in recent years, suggesting that it is a landowners and developers issue and that it is they who have been failing to deliver. The document also proposes first homes, which would provide a 30% discount to first-time buyers of new homes and would comprise 25% of all affordable housing, with priority over other affordable tenures. This would be wholly unsuitable for Norwich, where we know that the real desperate need is for affordable rented properties. It also proposes to increase the threshold for affordable housing currently applied to sites of over 10 units to between 40 and 50 units, thus stifling the delivery of affordable housing on smaller sites. These thresholds will be set nationally with no opportunity for local flexibility. Colleagues, I contend that these changes would rip apart the current democratically accountable planning system, would restrict opportunities for public involvement, and would suppress the delivery of much needed affordable housing. There is no detail on how the zoning system would work or how environmental and sustainability protections would operate. They contain too much central control and too little local discretion to reflect local need. They would undermine the joint process for local plan making in a way which could seriously disadvantage Norwich. In short, they are potentially very damaging to Norwich as a city and also the greater Norwich area, and we must make clear our opposition and reservations. And that's what we're proposing here, in addition to Sustainable Development Panel, which considered this paper at an earlier stage. And they also wanted to, while supporting the recommendations, also added an additional recommendation, which is to recommend to Cabinet that the leader of the Council's letter to the Secretary of State for Housing, Communities and Local Government, agreed at 22nd September 2020, is also signed by Councillor Stonard, Cabinet Member for Sustainable and Inclusive Growth, and the other group leaders.
Okay, thanks very much, Mike. So when we come to the recommendations, that will be an additional recommendation that we will
Thank you.
Vote on. No, thank you. So any officer comments on the white paper before I open it up to Cabinet members?
I don't think we have anything to add at this stage, but we're happy to assist with any questions.
Okay, thank you. Cabinet colleagues? Karen.
Thanks, Alan. Yes, I made that recommendation SDP because it was very clear that we were all in agreement on this, and I think it will send a much more powerful message to the government to say that, you know, us as a council, not one particular party, are all in agreement with this is wrong. This is going to be damaging for Norwich. It's going to be damaging for democracy, and I just wanted to send a message to the government that this is not a single party issue. This is a cross-party issue and something that we're all totally in agreement on.
I think even if we had Conservative members on this council, I have a vague memory of that, they would be endorsing the consensus on the council, because there's a lot of concern and a lot of hostility to this white paper. It's really important, as we're doing, getting a robust set of responses to the white paper into the government. Because I think there'll be a number of changes that will take place, but very concerned about the obvious failure really to recognise that the housing issues in large part can be addressed through giving councils the power to build more council homes and to use right to buy receipts for that purpose, and additional powers as well. So that's an opportunity to make that case. Right. Any other comments on the white paper from Cabinet members? I think the STP, the Sustainable Working Party, have done a very good job on this. Sandra, James. James first and then Sandra.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of comments, I think. Whilst we shouldn't look at the current planning system through rose-tinted spectacles. What it does give us is democratic control over development and applications, and gives people a say over the planning proposals that affect them and where they live. And that includes a right to objection, which I gather the new proposals probably wouldn't allow. And I think 2020 is going to be remembered for many things, mostly COVID. But I think the other thing is that it's going to be the year that the Tories took planning away from the people, and that's a real shame. Thank you.
Sandra, thank you.
I'm still hopeful that it's not going to happen. I haven't thrown the baby out of the bath yet. So first of all, I'd like to thank Cabinet members and other members of the Council again to support the planning motion at the last full Council. And I'd like to thank the Council for robustly challenging the white paper and officers for drafting such a strong response, which we fully agree with. And Mike has very eloquently laid out, the endless problems with this white paper. My question is around what does the white paper mean for the Council's plan to review the development management plan policies? Because I know that was supposed to be penciled in for this year, beginning next year to start. Could you just update me what that means for this review?
Okay.
I think that's one for Graham.
Yes. In short, we don't know, because this is only a white paper and we haven't had the government's response to the consultation that it's carrying out, and whether it is going to drive it forward in the way that it sets out in the white paper. But if it does drive the legislation forward as is trailed in the white paper, it looks increasingly difficult for the Council to review its development management policies in the way that it had previously intended. As you may know, the Greater Norwich Development Partnership has just looked at the timetable for preparing the local plan, the Greater Norwich Local Plan, which is the overarching strategic framework and the sites plan that's coming forward. And that they're trying to accelerate so it can work within the grain of the current planning system rather than be prepared under the new legislation framework. We're not going to have the same opportunity to do that with a plan that has yet to be commenced, as was our original intention to prepare the development management policies plan next summer. So it looks like whatever the new planning system is going to look like, that'll probably be the framework within which any replacement for the current policies plan gets looked at. So yes, it's not necessarily good news and we can't be certain on it, but it looks very likely that we won't be able to undertake that plan review as we previously intended.
Okay, any further comments? So if we go to the recommendations, we're asked to approve the proposed response on the planning white paper to be submitted to the government by the 29th of October. So well done for getting that in and through to Cabinet in a timely way. Thank officers and Mike for that. And then we've got the second recommendation, which is to effectively show there is a consensus across the Council in supporting the recommendations. So we'll take both those recommendations. I don't think there's going to be anybody voting against that. Could we therefore vote on the recommendations, please? Excellent. Okay, so we'll wing that off to government, and compelling arguments should hopefully change their minds on some of the more egregious elements of this white paper. Right. Let's go on to item 7. Councillor Kendrick is going to introduce this. And you just need to turn yourself on.
Can you hear me?
Can now, yes.
No, sorry about that. Can I ask Councillor Wright to talk to this report as obviously as chair of the Scrutiny Committee?
Okay, James, over to you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Kendrick. So the report before you covers the work that the Scrutiny Committee did at our last meeting in September, which is essentially broken down into 2 parts. The one I won't dwell on too long is the LEP, largely because there were so many great questions from members of the scrutiny committee that we didn't have time to deal with it all in our last meeting, and we're continuing it tomorrow. So at your next meeting, I'll then speak to the full report at that point. But I would like to thank Chris Starkey and Lisa Roberts from the LEP who came along and answered the questions, and also provided written answers afterwards to those questions they couldn't answer due to time constraints. That was a really useful piece of scrutiny. But the main thing I'd like you to consider today is the report of the Select Committee into short-term lets. For the benefit of anyone watching, our scrutiny committee is, as well as meeting monthly, is able to have a sort of a series of select committees which are made up of a number of people from the committee, are tightly focused on a particular issue. And Councillors Carlo, Giles, McCartney, Gray and Oliver did an excellent piece of work on short-term lets, Airbnbs if you will, and the increase of those and the impact on Norwich. And there are 11 recommendations on pages 83 and 84 of the report today, really for Cabinet to consider in relation to short-term lets in Norwich. I don't think I'll read them all out because you can see them there, but yes, it is of concern, I think, the changing nature of some of the properties in the city. So yes, there are those recommendations to your consideration. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll just say a word about the meeting with the LEP. I attended that meeting myself, and I thought it was a very good discussion. I echo what James has said on that. Very good discussion. I think it provided a much clearer insight into the work of the LEP, and I think that was to the benefit of both the LEP in getting questions and concerns covered by members of scrutiny, but equally I think the LEP did provide scrutiny members with a lot of information about what they're currently doing across some crucial areas like COVID and recovery, environmental issues, and issues like the accountability of the local enterprise partnerships. So I thought that was a good piece of work and a very thorough and positive discussion. In regards to the work done by the Select Committee on Airbnb, I mean, the first thing I'd say, and there may be other colleagues on the Cabinet who want to comment on this, that we thank the working group for a very thorough piece of work, and Cabinet has carried out an initial consideration. And I suppose, you know, this is, if all the recommendations were acted upon at this time or in the time frame in which we are currently operating, that would be a major piece of work, and significant resources would have to be used. And so, as we're doing in a number of other areas, sort of ruthless prioritisation as to where we direct our resources, and just reminding ourselves that, and it will be a report that comes to next Cabinet about the council finances. Budgets are even tighter because a government has not really coughed up for the costs of COVID to the council over and above some of the immediate costs. Much of that is about making sure we're the efficient conduit of money to businesses and communities and supporting people who are vulnerable. There are 500 Airbnb properties in Norwich, which is fewer than many other places. Seems a lot, but that's 1% of the housing stock of the city. And as colleagues will know, and it's in the public domain as well, the work that's been done by Councillor Beth Jones, working with the private rented sector, dealing with the issues of tenure insecurity, issues around the quality that particular part of the housing stock, which provides homes for 25% of the Norwich population. This is an area, in addition to our broader housing responsibilities as a housing authority and so on, where we have put much of our energy to improve standards and so on. So contextualizing it in that way, I think where we would currently stand at the moment, to be practical about it, is if there are means by which people can raise complaints with their councillors or write into the council about their experience of Airbnb, we would take a look at the most obvious examples where there have been, a number of complaints about particular Airbnb properties. So I think it's highlighted the issue for us. I think it's provided us with a good idea of this sector, and that's particularly valuable to us. But I think at the moment, given resource strains and resource priorities, I think we would be looking at picking up particular examples of concern about particular Airbnb properties. I think the opportunity to do a major piece of survey work is really at the present time a step too far. But we have the data, we have a good piece of research, so that's been particularly valuable to us, and I record our thanks to those committee members and to Scrutiny for setting that working group up. Are there any cabinet members who would like to pick up before I bring in Councillor Wright again? Councillor Jones?
Thank you. Really just to echo what you've already said around the private rented sector, and we have some excellent officers who can address a number of concerns that are in these points, particularly around standards and safety. There are reporting mechanisms in place already for private rentals, and that similarly, that standard, people can report that if there's issues. And I think, yeah, I would love licensing of every private rented in the same way, talking around Airbnbs, but our priority has to be focusing on those thousands of Norwich residents who live in the private rented sector initially when resources are tight.
Thank you, Beth. Any other cabinet colleagues? Yeah, James, you had your hand up in response, and then Andra.
Yeah, well, I'd say thank you, Chair. I will feed back those comments to the committee tomorrow. It's also worth just pointing out that at our meeting in November, on the 19th of November, we will be looking at homelessness and through the sort of prism of COVID, impact possibly at the ending of the furlough scheme may have, Section 21 notices in the private rented sector, and street homelessness. So again, that will be a piece of work that we'll bring back to you probably at the December cabinet with some recommendations, no doubt.
Yeah, and I'm sure Councillor Jones, if she's available, will be keen to come along to that scrutiny committee to hear your deliberations. I mean, that's a really very pertinent issue, so and timely. So thank you for adding that to the scrutiny work programme. Sandra.
Thank you. Well, Alan, you've already said that there's at the moment around 500 Airbnbs advertised in Norwich. We're obviously worried that the COVID-19 situation may increase the demand for Airbnbs further, because people may decide to stay in the UK for stay in the UK for breaks. I've got a question from Councillor Carlo, who's set on that task and finish or select committee group. She was just wondering, one of the recommendation is that there is a portfolio responsibility for the issue around Airbnb, and I seem to hear that it might be Councillor Beth Jones who might have the pleasure of overseeing that issue as well. And she just wanted to have clarification on whether the cabinet could clarify who may be the portfolio holder under which that would fall.
Well, that's a recommendation at this stage which we're not minded to accept, and on the principle that the amount of work being covered by cabinet members at the present time in the COVID context means that people are fully occupied. I think what we would try, I'm not ruling any of this out, but we're going to need to wait for less challenging times. I think for the moment, there is a means by which people can express their concern about Airbnb, and we have enforcement powers, and we will use those enforcement powers. You know, there are some clear guidelines in this area, and enforcement can be used, and that's the issue really, making sure that where there are enforcement issues, we have the means and the powers to already deal with that. Okay, so the recommendations, if there are no more questions, is to consider the recommendations which we have done, and as I said, we thank Scrutiny Committee for the work that they've done on this, and both that and on the Local Enterprise Partnership. Okay, let's move on. Item 8, very important item, aren't they all? But Home Improvement Team Disability Adaptations Service, and that's Councillor Harris.
Thank you. I think the officers are logging in as we speak, so that's really good. Yeah, I think, yeah, sorry, I was just making sure people were in who were meant to be in. So yes, welcome everyone. So a couple of things before I talk to item 8. There's a couple of small corrections. The date of the cabinet paper needs to be amended, and I've already pointed that out to Alex, because I wouldn't want anyone to look back on the paper and think it came to cabinet a month earlier than it did. And then in paragraph 8, page 93, there's a couple of typos. It should just read 5,000, not 5,000K. So that gets us to where we need to be for the paper. So I'm absolutely delighted to be presenting this report to you today. It's taken a lot of hard work and determination to get to this point. In the city, the council's home improvement team provides grants and loans to residents who own their own property, privately rent, or in housing association properties to help them to remain living independently. The service uses disabled facilities grants to fund applications to people's homes, sometimes combined with grants to facilitate hospital discharge or prevent admission to hospital. The aim is simply to allow residents to remain in their own home and to live as independently as possible. Timely intervention is absolutely crucial. Delivering adaptations can help people retain their independence or give them back their independence and reduce the need for expensive care packages. Someone receiving an adaptation to their home can expect to stay out of hospital or the need to have a care home placement for 5 years more than if they did not have an adaptation. These are startling figures. The criteria for awarding a grant and what it can be used for are set out in statute and covers works up to £30,000. Disabled facilities grants are means tested, and the applicants might have to make a contribution towards the cost of any works. Norwich City Council provides a separate discretionary grant that pays the first £5,000 of anyone's contribution, regardless of income. This is very helpful, as the average cost of an adaptation is £5,000. It's worth mentioning that our home improvement team has received national recognition for the service that it provides, being highly commended in 2019 for the best adaptation service at the National Healthy Homes Awards. The City Council adopted the Norfolk-wide Integrated Housing Adaptation Team model in 2013. The home improvement team comprises of a City Council employed team leader, an administrator, technical officers and caseworkers, as well as an occupational therapist and OT assistant practitioner, both employed by social services, but working within the one team. Caseworkers are central to the team, providing support to the residents and to the officers involved in the timely delivery of any adaptation, whilst freeing up professional officers' time. The customer journey is relatively straightforward, and for the most part, adaptations are delivered through the single team in the council. However, If we move on to the current service provided for council tenants, the service is far less streamlined and somewhat disjointed. It still compares favourably with the rest of the country, but we could do better. We could be one of the leading authorities nationally. Unlike the private sector, which has a single team helping residents, a council tenant may have contact from a number of different people from different organisations. It is at present not an integrated service, with tenants having to wait for referrals from social services to ourselves. Not having a caseworker approach leads to somewhat disjointed, lengthy service, and often a lack of support to the actual tenant throughout the process. Quite simply, the recommendations in this report seek to resolve these issues and to adapt a tenure-neutral approach. Timely interventions will improve people's independence and quality of life. A tenure-neutral service employing caseworkers and adopting the model currently used in the private sector, with access to a suite of grants, will ensure that the speed of the adaptation is improved, that our approach is more person-centred and easier for people to access. Going back to the recommendations, it was proposed that the current assistance for council tenants is enhanced with a suite of grants mirroring those offered for private sector residents, that the operating model of the home improvement team is replicated for council tenants, and that we immediately create a full-time caseworker post and one full-time senior caseworker post. This really is a truly exciting proposal. I've already touched upon the importance of the caseworker role to our proposals and the desire that council tenants should be offered the same high level of service that residents in the private sector receive. The additional staffing costs are set out in the paper, and it will be of no surprise to you that I will be looking for an increase in the HRA capital budget for disabled adaptations in next year's budget. Just putting a marker down at this stage. I know that Lee, Rachel and Kevin are in attendance tonight, and they might well want to add to my summary of the paper. We are striving to make things equal for all of our residents when making disabled adaptations to their homes, and they deserve no less. It will simply be a tenure-neutral service. The dedication of our officers is most certainly to be commended. So I will formally remove the recommendations on page 91, recommendations 1 to 3, but I'm sure officers will want to add to what I've said. Thank you, Alan.
Thank you very much, Gail. And Rachel, this is your first time at Caverns, I think.
Yes, it is. So thank you for the invitation. Yes, I joined the council in May, so it's my first time here. Thank you.
Very nice to see you. So we have Rachel, Kevin, and Lee. Any points any of you would like to add to Gail's presentation of the report?
Can I just add? I'm going to just clearly just thank Councillor Harris, Rachel, and Kevin. It's been an ambition, a shared ambition. I think we've certainly Councillor Harris over a number of years now to, I suppose, level up is the phrase I would use, because yes, we can definitely do better, and our clearly our view is that tenants of the city deserve every bit as great services as being provided to other people in this particular area. And what's really interesting as well, I think, and Rachel's title is the Independent Living Manager, and I think that's the big shift I think that Councillor Harris has made really is a shift away from just delivering grants to helping people live independently. However we can do that, and grants are only part of that. So I thank all of the members for the help and support in getting this to this stage, and here's to a successful future with the new project.
Yeah, that's very good report, very good indeed. I've got a couple of comments, questions. Kevin first, and then Mike.
Yeah, I just wanted to first of all say, Gail's summarised and commented on it, and it is a wonderful piece. It's an integrated piece from my portfolio point of view in preventing homelessness by being helping people to stay in their own home longer. That reduces the just one of the many tragedies that we see of rough sleeping, where people are no longer supported in their homes and can no longer live there. And so it's good. And I'd also like to comment, it's a brilliant example again of partnership working and how we can optimize shrinking budgets by working well and in a focused manner with partners. And it's just one more, and it shows how the public sector can so often provide a much better service.
Thanks, Kevin. Mike?
All right, I had a problem there unmuting, I don't know why. I think this is absolutely brilliant, and it's exactly what we should be doing. It will make a big difference to the lives of the recipients, and we know that it takes very little. Sometimes very small things affect someone's ability to live independently at home. It can be a really minor thing that in terms of their ability, but it has a major effect on independent living. And we know that when that happens, the only other option is institutional care of some sort, very often, be it in a care home or be it in a more sort of clinical setting. And we also know that people who are able to live independently in their homes have better outcomes and generally longer lives and more healthy lives than people who are in institutional care of any kind. And indeed, we know that when people go into institutional care, very often they decline in a way that they wouldn't do if they were at home. And you know, that's physical and mental health and morale, all of those things, and you can't separate them out, they're all linked. The more that can be done to help people stay in their own homes, stay where they feel safe and secure, where in familiar surroundings, and prevent them going into institutional care, the better. And we should be really proud that we're upping our game on this and doing this piece of work. So I really, really welcome it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Mike. Any other cabinet colleagues? So Sandra, do you have a question at all or comment?
I do. First of all, I'd like to say that this is obviously a very, very welcome improvement to the existing system. And thank you, Gail, for your ambitions and for striving to level up. It's really great to see. And I'd just like to say that my question is in no way intended to dampen the enthusiasm around this. But I think actually people will be quite concerned to learn that there was such a huge disparity between adaptations carried out by the council for the private sector and for the council tenants. So I was just wondering whether you could explain how that could develop historically, this disparity.
Shall I
pick that up, Lee?
Yeah, I think it's probably because we, I mean, historically, I think as well, throughout the country, I think this is true. So this is groundbreaking stuff, I think, really, that we're trying here. And I think essentially what did happen is that we'd look for other solutions, I think, really. So rather than doing adaptations or looking at properties, we try and get people to move. So that would delay any installations or any adaptations we do, because we'd be negotiating people around getting them to move to a more appropriate property then. And invariably that didn't happen. So effectively, you know, what would happen? That would just prolong the time that somebody had applied for it. So it's a slightly false timescale in a way, but the reality is that, you know, some of our preferred solutions weren't trying to allow people to live in their properties adequately, but we're actually trying to look at different solutions. Now that still remains a solution, but I think our default is shifted. And I'm looking at Kevin for a nod and Rachel for a nod as well, really. So that's essentially what's happening, is that if people have lived in a house for 40 years, it's probably unrealistic to expect them to try and move in the next 10 or so. So actually we'll do what we can to allow them to live independently there. So that's a countrywide thing, and I think this is why it's groundbreaking, because we've flipped the thinking on it, and actually think that people, you know, will survive better, you know, and thrive better, as Councillor Stannard said, if they're in familiar surroundings that they've invested a lot of time and emotional energy in over the years.
Okay, and Rachel?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that Kevin and his team, like myself, are also part of the housing directorate now, which Kevin was not previously. So I think that's sort of brought things closer, and we're working much more together with housing officers, tenancy management officers. So I think the picture is clearer, and we know what we need to do.
Alan,
Yeah.
Alan, could we bring in Kevin Ears? So
Yes,
he
I was
can...
going to ask Kevin. Yes, Kevin. Hello, Kevin. Good to see you.
Hello. Hello. Nice to see you all.
So, Kevin, would you like to add anything?
Well, I think Rachel touched on it very eloquently. We were a very separate directorate, and I can add that that's common up and down the country in most stock-owning local authorities, that the disabled adaptation service that is offered in the private sector is often completely separate to the service offered to council tenants. That's certainly really common in London, but it's common up and down the country to my knowledge. We have been realigned within the housing service, and my whole remit has been changed to set up a tenure neutrality approach towards adaptations. So that's using the best practice on both sides of the picture to ultimately get the best for all residents, regardless of tenure. It's something I'm really passionate about and quite excited about, but I think that might help explain some of the background around it.
Yeah, thank you very much, Kevin. James, did you have any comments you wanted to make?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm delighted by the sentiments that I've heard here this evening and in the report. And Councillor Harris talked about the sort of person-centric approach, which I think is absolutely marvellous, and will no doubt recognise what's coming next. And that's my colleague Councillor Lubbock has been talking for over 5 years now about the challenge of getting simple adaptations of a shower tray being put into a council property rather than a bath, to enable that older resident who doesn't meet the threshold for having specific disabled adaptations, but they just need that simple change so they can stay in their property. And what I really hope that will come out of this and come out of the sentiments that I've been hearing just now is that sort of thing is now possible. It's the it's the art of the possible, isn't the phrase? So we can now do that, rather than necessarily needing to suggest, well, we need to wait for there to be an OT or somebody else to have a look at that. So I'm positive, I think, about what's going to happen as a result of this.
Right, I'll take one final comment from Mike.
Yeah, I just come back on that, James. I mean, we're all in the same place here in terms of wanting to make sure that people get adaptations according to their need, and that's fine. I know Councillor Lubbock has argued for many years that there shouldn't be an OT assessment and that certain people over a certain age can automatically get a shower tray. But of course, age isn't the determinant. It's not about age, it's about need. And that's why OTs, who are highly qualified clinical professionals, need to be involved and to make sure that the resources are directed to where they're really needed, because they are scarce resources. So I think we're in the same place, but we just want to make sure that when those adaptations take place, they're based on evidence of need, and as I say, that the resources are directed to where they're most needed.
Okay.
Can I just correct a point for the record? Councillor Lubbock didn't ever say automatically. It was always based on need. But
right.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to see this this consensus creak at all. So I think we'll draw the conversation to a close there. But this is an excellent piece of work, and particularly commends the work of Kevin and Rachel as part of this. And thank you, Gail, as well, for driving it politically. So can we go to the recommendations? Are we happy to accept the 3 recommendations listed on page 91? Okay, excellent. Right, thank you very much. Okay, let's move on then to item 9. This is Councillor Harris again, and it's a contract for solar thermal water heating to social housing properties. And that's page 103.
Alan? So, as it's getting dark in here, right, 103, page 103. So we've over a number of years successfully installed over 700 thermodynamic hot water systems into our own social housing stock. We've put significant investment into maintaining our housing stock, but also recognise the need for fuel efficiency and, importantly, the need to reduce fuel poverty. Thermodynamic hot water systems help us to do just that. During these challenging times, if we can reduce fuel bills for our tenants, this gives them more disposable income to spend on other essentials such as food and to put money into the local economy. The normal procurement process has been undertaken. After the tender evaluation exercise was completed, Impact Renewable Energy Limited was the preferred supplier. In fact, this is the same contractor which successfully delivered the programme of installations during 2019 to 20. They've already proven that they can deliver quality work and they use local labour. The value of this new contract is a maximum spend of 500,000 to be funded from the HRA capital budget. Based upon the tender submission, it is anticipated that there will be approximately 130 thermodynamic systems installed during 2020 to 21. The installations will, as far as possible, be targeted to those tenancies identified as most at risk of fuel poverty and in need of energy efficiency for hot water systems. So back to the recommendation for your agreement. To award the contract for the installation of thermodynamic hot water systems for housing properties 2020 to 21 to Impact Renewable Energy Limited. Officers might want to add to this. I know this will be well supported by other Cabinet colleagues because this is one of our favourite schemes.
Indeed it is. Indeed it is. So any officer comment on this? Lee or Paul? Paul? Hello?
Just a brief comment to say to Councillor Harris, this is a further investment, as we've said, in the stock, in your housing stock. And for next year, we're actually looking to further expand the technology solution here to include a photovoltaic PV element to a further programme for next year, which will further drive out more efficiencies and a reduction in fuel costs. So no, just content to support Councillor Harris with regard to this matter.
Okay, thanks very much, Paul. Can I take it that there are no questions on this, that people are happy to support this initiative? Yeah. Okay, so the recommendations are on page 103. Please indicate. Thank you very much. Okay, that's agreed. Let's move on to page 109, and this is vehicle lease and future contract awards for Norwich City Council Services Limited. So this is going to be Councillor Maguire.
Right, thank you, Chair. I remember our first steps on this journey of taking our services back in-house. I particularly recall the moment at Cabinet when we agreed to give notice on Norwich North Environmental. I remember describing it as the first bite of the first chunk in consuming an elephant. We now have the land for the depot, and the depot is being prepared for occupation early next year in time for NCSL to begin its work. And this is the next big step, the procurement of a brand new fleet of vehicles, large and small, with which NCLS can begin to give first-class service to the people of Norwich. The intention of this report is both to seek approval for the award of a contract which amounts to just under £1.5 million over 5 years for the leasing of vehicles, and also to delegate future awarding of contracts to the Chief Executive as shareholder and the Cabinet member for safe and sustainable city environment. The C word has been heard very often in its influence on Cabinet's decision-making lately, but it's a while since we've heard the B word. In placing this order, both COVID and Brexit have made their presence felt. In particular, they've lengthened the lead-in period between ordering and delivering, such that if approval is given this afternoon on this item and an order is placed straight after that, it will be April or even May before those vehicles arrive. That's 6 or 7 months' time. And some of the vehicles, because of lead-in times, might not even arrive until August, 9 months away. So it's a timely reminder of a certain politician's comment events, dear boy events, since this in turn has implications for what we do next and how we do it. So even if we make a decision this afternoon, NCSL will need to negotiate an extension to the current vehicle leasing arrangements of certain vehicles, which in turn has cost implications, since A, the company will likely to have to pay increased leasing costs, and B, the vehicles currently released are not new, and so additional maintenance costs may well be incurred along with possible downtime. This has implications. We cannot delay placing the order, and we've less time to ponder on vehicle selection. We want the vehicles to be low or neutral carbon, but we have a budget which is of course not limitless. Quite frankly, electric commercial vehicles are still in their infancy. They work in some very specific locations, but not necessarily for our purposes. Smaller vehicles are more viable if expensive, and Norwich North Environmental already has one electric vehicle which is being piloted. This has had to be adapted, however, because it was too quiet to use in the parks, but generally it's receiving good feedback. Further, based on this pilot, the team are looking at leasing 4 electric vehicles and installing charger points, etc. at the new depot. The ducting is already going in. It's wise, therefore, that a leasing arrangement will be made. This ensures that at the end of the 5-year period, technologies will have advanced and we will see tried, tested and reliable fleet from which to replace what we leased to begin with. In the meantime, the leased fleet will be new, of much lower emission than the current fleet and requiring far less maintenance. This also will contribute to a lower carbon footprint. We will build on this, and in 2026, we'll be able to see a further quantum fall in the City Council's own carbon footprint. So once again, Chair, we've seen and are seeing step by step in real time with real actions by real people, we will help the city to progress to being carbon free by the target date of 2050. And I commend these approvals to Cabinet and hope that they're given.
Thank you very much, Kevin. Rob, anything to add at all?
A couple of points, Chair. One is, clearly this is part of a significant programme of work for the insourcing of the environmental services currently delivered by Norwich North Environmental. And this is clearly one part of it. And the priority is around a safe transfer of those services by the 1st of April 2021. The second one is really to reiterate a point that Councillor Maguire made is, there is a very tight budget envelope for the transfer of those services and, the works that need to be undertaken. This contract and any future ones need to sit within that budget framework. So just those points for the moment.
Okay, there's a point about timing and timeliness. Any other Cabinet members want to comment? Pretty straightforward procurement. Any other questions? James, Sandra?
Yes, I think it won't come to a surprise to you that I would have preferred to see the insourcing operation to be started earlier. I think too much time was lost between the decision being made and actually the first proposal for this Norwich City Services company to come forward. And it feels like a very rushed process. And I do also think that as a result of this rushed process, we now have to lease the vehicles instead of having time to plan our own fleet. But it is obviously very welcome to see that the lease contract includes consideration of electric vehicles. And if you allow me to, I would like to thank Councillor Price and Neil for pushing so hard for this in the insourcing working group. Now to move to the other procurement contracts, you may know that most of the day-to-day equipment that will be required for the environmental services, such as hedge trimmers, chainsaws or leaf blowers can now be electric and could be charged from renewable energy at the depot, like Kevin said. Can you reassure me that the upcoming delegated contracts will enable this combination of electric equipment and renewable energy use, which is not only better for the environment, but obviously also much better for staff who will not be exposed to dangerous ultrafine particles?
That was a very wide-ranging set of comments, and I think outside of the spirit of why you're at the table to ask questions on specific items. As you know, there is a working group, and you did attend one of those meetings, but your representatives who've been on it from the start will know how thorough and timely it's a piece of work which needs to be done at tempo, but it is within the time frame that we've set ourselves for insourcing the first of those joint ventures coming to join us next April, and everything is on track for that. So I would want to just counter your initial observation. I'll just put that to one side. There is a general question about how the equipment that we will be procuring will be commissioned in terms of its energy source, and that is noted. I think from the presentation of the report, you would have a very clear indication of making sure that we get the very best available and energy efficient technology when we commission for the equipment for the joint ventures going forward. So I will note those comments, and I will okay, and then I'm going to move to the recommendations. But before I do move to the recommendations and the voting on them, and these are on page 109, I'd like to invite Rachel Crosby to say whether it is possible for us to have a dispensation regarding a call-in on this decision.
Thank you, Chair. If you do agree to the recommendations, then I've agreed that for recommendation 1 with relation to the vehicles, that it can't be subject to a call-in, and that's based on Appendix 6, 15.8 of the Constitution. This refers to a decision that's urgent, where a delay would prejudice the interest of the council in the opinion of the monitoring officer. Looking at the dates of delivery, the need to provide the services, then in my opinion, and based on what I've heard today, what I've seen, then if this decision was subject to a call-in, then I think it could delay things, which would then prejudice the council. So no call-in for the first.
Okay, so timeliness is a theme that's run through comments and presentation of this report. So with that knowledge, can we now vote on the recommendations on page 109? Okay, so that is passed. Thank you. Right, let's go on to item 11. This is in the name of Councillor Kendrick. And it is about digital development platform procurement.
Thank you very much, Chair. Our systems is being used by the Council to help our front-facing IT systems communicate with our back-office systems, as well as external services, for example, accessing DVLA checks. So far, we have used this system to fully automate online parking permit applications and renewals, including virtual permit and online permit checking facilities. We have also used it so our food and safety team can now carry out all premises inspections using the OutSystems app, generating final report and grading remotely as part of the inspection while still in the field. In future, the use of OutSystems will be important. The cornerstone of our new customer experience and digital strategy will help us to assist services in delivering a transformation and efficiency programs. Originally part of the LGSS contract, we now have the ability for the council to continue to use this when the contract expires. So I urge Cabinet to approve the recommendations.
Okay, Nikki, anything you want to add, or Paul, if Paul's in with us? Not sure he is.
No, Paul's not here. I suppose one of the things that councillors that this system will allow us to do is to have a golden record for our customers and citizens. So when we open up our portal, people will be able to see across the systems what, be able to pull information out of different back office systems, which is something we've kind of struggled with in the past. So it's a really useful piece of kit in terms of becoming more digital as a council.
Well, that's always a very good thing. So any cabinet colleagues? James, you have an interest in these things in particular? Anything you want to add? No? Sandra? You okay? Good. Let's go to the recommendation then, which is on page 117. Could you indicate if you are in favour? Great, okay, that's passed. Now let's go on to cash collections, item 12, page 125. Councillor Stannard.
Thank you, Chair. So I think this is fairly straightforward. It's the new contract for cash collections, and you'll see that the proposal is the most cost-effective bid is from Security Plus Limited, and that's a very competitive price. The one thing I do want to highlight, of course, amongst all of this is the move to cashless collections. That's something we've been wanting to do for some time, the direction we've been wanting to move in for some time. That would, of course, be much more convenient for many, many members of the general public, as well as being more cost effective for us. So that within the costings and the activity which has been profiled and planned for this new contract, assumptions around cashless collections and how much of our collection activity will be cashless over the period have been made.
Thank you very much, Mike. Any comments, Andy?
No, nothing to add. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Right, any issues around this? Any questions by the cabinet members? James, Sandra? No? Okay, let's go to the recommendation then. All those in favour? Excellent, that's passed. And let's go on now to item 13, the above the line part of this, and that's Gail.
Thank you, Alan. So this paper is to consider disposal of land as detailed in report 15. To understand the reason for this disposal, some background information is needed. In August, the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government announced that additional funding was available for rough sleeper funding under their Next Steps accommodation programme. This was in effect a follow-on from the call to get all rough sleepers accommodated during the initial COVID-19 crisis lockdown. For the record, I would like to highlight the tremendous work done by our housing team to do just that, and then the work that was undertaken to move people onto more settled accommodation. The overall objective of the Next Steps accommodation programme is to reduce rough sleeping and to provide accommodation to develop a permanent solution to rough sleeping. Proposals were co-designed with our rough sleep advisor from MHCLG, Broadland Housing Association, Path and Pathways. Yet again, strong partnership working. There were two funds available, and these are detailed on page 134, paragraph 4. Norwich City Council submitted 2 bids for both funds. For the immediate revenue support in 2020-21, we submitted a bid for a total of £217,350. And we've been told that MHCLG has confirmed that subject to final due diligence, we have been successful with the bid. Again, full details can be found on page 134, paragraph 5A. It is exciting that within that bid, funds are available to support the provision of indoor 7-day access to food. Moving on to the second bid, In partnership with Broadland Housing Association, a bid was submitted for 1.222 million of capital funding for 2020-21 to purchase 10 properties off the open market and a further 6 properties to be developed as modular construction on land owned by the council. Most importantly, a further bid was made for 281.5 thousand of revenue funding to provide 2 integrated housing and care navigator posts to be hosted by St Martin's as part of the Pathways team. This will enable support to be provided to these properties and thus the residents in them until 2024, and then a further 140.7 thousand for another post, which we're still waiting to hear if we've been successful with. We all know that Housing First is about providing a home and the relevant support. This is how it succeeds. At the moment, MHCLG are minded to fund the bid for the capital funding and the 2 posts I spoke of earlier, still awaiting due diligence, I believe, and will wait the further decision on the 3rd post. That moves us on to the purpose of this paper, which is that we have identified land that would be suitable to support the development of the 6 one-bedroom flats. The details of the land and the proposed disposal are included in the exempt report later in the agenda. The timescale for spending the money for the 16 properties is very tight. This is a schedule by government, so we have no sort of control over it. So although we've not had final confirmation of the award, the completion of build and acquisition needs to be by the end of March 2021. So nothing like a little bit of pressure, really. So for the new dwellings, Broadland Housing Association will adopt a modular construction build, the only way that the target date can possibly be met. There will be the need to seek planning permission, and if the timescale does not look achievable for these 6 properties, we would look at purchasing them on the open market. This is not going to be an easy journey with such tight delivery deadlines, but what a difference it will make to those moving from rough sleeping to more permanent supported accommodation. Yet again, I have to thank the officers for all the work they've done in preparing the very, very ambitious bids and for this report. I'd have to say this is team working at its very best, so I'm really very proud of them. It shows vision, it shows that we and our partners really care. So I'll move to the recommendations, but I know that officers will have other things to add and perhaps cabinet members might want to comment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gail. So are there any officer comments on this report? Yeah, Lee.
Just to echo the bit from Councillor Harris there about the teamwork, but also the continuum from March, the middle of March, when Dame Louise Casey demanded everyone in. So the work that people like Hayley Selway did and the housing options team to get people in off the streets through that process, the baton then being picked up by Chris and Andrew, I can see here, in terms of making sure that not just we got everyone in, but people stayed in and were given much more permanent and supported accommodation moving forward. So I think, again, even our colleagues at finance, accountants, and right the way across the council, actually, people have been pulling the stops out, not only to get the bid in. And one of the reasons we'll get this money is they know we'll spend it and they'll know we'll achieve the outcomes that we set out. So I think, hats off, I think, really to people inside and outside the organisation. And once again, I think for Councillors Harris, Maguire for driving this through and helping us again get it over the line.
Okay, thanks very much, Lee. Andrew?
Yeah, I think the other thing I would just add is that the capital funding is for this year currently. There will be opportunity to bid for years 2 and years 3 for next year and the year after. So if this project is successful, it could open up opportunities for future similar bids.
Great. Any other officer comments? Chris, anything to add?
No, nothing from me really. No, it's just to say that we are looking at, obviously, hopefully if this is successful, as Andrew said, we'll be looking to do further bids in years 2 and 3.
Okay, well, this is an excellent piece of work and excellent news. So thank you very much for everybody who's been working on this. I'll take any other comments. Kevin, first of all.
Thanks, Alan. Yeah, this obviously involves my portfolio, and Gail and I have had several meetings about this. Officers have done a brilliant job. We've got a fantastic team. They've received plaudits here, there, and everywhere for the work that they've done. And this is one more example of how we do things, and it's done in partnership. And I think also it signals an important step, because it signals that we are not just about relief, but rather resettlement. It's about not just, throwing a parcel of food to someone, but it's about providing housing or homes in a supportive manner. That can only come about through the partnership working, which is exemplified in pathways. And it's just one more example of that journey that we're making. So it's great to see.
Thank you very much, Kevin. Great piece of cross-council work, both at the political level and at the administrative level. Very good. Okay. So should we, are we all okay? Sandy, you want to come in?
Yeah, I'd just like to add my thanks to everyone involved. There's really nothing not to like about this. So well done. Thank you very much.
Okay. James?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just also like to say this is a brilliant piece of work, and so my thanks to everyone. And actually, whilst you look at the reports and you think some of the sums of money are quite large, actually, when you break it down and you look at the number of homes that are being delivered and the long-term impact that it will have on the positive impact it will have on people's lives, I think it's an absolutely fantastic use of resource. So brilliant. Thanks very much.
Okay, any other colleagues? Okay. Well, let's go to the recommendations on this very, very positive piece of work and positive development. And the recommendations are on page 133 for the necessary land disposal. Okay. All those in favour, please indicate. Good, that's passed. Right, that's the end of the public items. So we now have to exclude the public to go below the line. Means we
Chair.
all count. Yes.
I was just thinking, I think we've got everybody in for the exempt part. So if you allow me to, what I might just do is just end the stream.
Okay.
And then that might take about a minute, and then we can just continue on with this stream, if that makes sense, rather
Chair.
than going on to additional.
Really
Chair,
good.
there's another question. Can I just say that we could ask whether anyone has any objections to anything included in the exempt papers? And if not, as we've done in the past, we can just vote on both together, take it as one vote on both.
Alan, you're muted.
Didn't realise I'd been muted. So there may be a procedural issue which Alex will pick up in a moment, because I was thinking the same thing as you.
Yeah. If no one go below the line, we don't have to, but I just note that if we can be clear to note that we've circulated an amended report. So if we can just note that for the minutes and everyone's seen that, and if everyone can indicate that they've seen that and considered it, yeah.
We're okay to do that. And the other thing,
anyone's burning to, we don't have to.
Yes, thanks, Alex. So the one thing I would just add, which I should have mentioned at the beginning of item 13, is that there is a correction. It's in the subject, it is managing assets, general fund, not housing.
That's right.
So that's why we had to do an amended report below the line. So if everybody is happy with noting the below the line report, we can therefore draw the meeting to a close. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Voted that, have we? Yes. Good. Put our hands up. make sure it's a true record. And thank you for your attendance and have a good evening.